Now, I'm going to tell you something that may make you sort of snicker just a little bit, but ask and you'll hear exactly the same answer. I've asked, I don't know how many people over here I've asked who, to me, seem to be doing exactly the same thing every day, coming in doing exactly the same thing every day. I ask them, I say, what do you like about your job so much? Well, let me tell you specific. I was with my dad. He was a dial-a-ride driver before he retired. In my mind, he was driving the same bus on the same roads in the same county, picking up the same people every day for 15 years. I said, Dad, if you could do over, your whole career, you're 21, what would you do in life? He said, the happiest I've ever been is driving this bus. And he said, because I just like it so much. He said, if I could, I'd probably just get on here and work for 40, 50 years right here. I said, tell me, Dad, what is it you like so much about this position? He said, oh, the variety. Now, see, I said you might snicker a little bit, but you know what? That is the truth over here. I said, Dad, help me see the variety you see. And I've asked many people that question. I always get the same answer. And it's fascinating to hear what variety there is, because Dad said, he said, no 2 days ever the same. That's the second comment that people make. No 2 days ever the same. I say, well, how do they differ? He said, well, some days it's raining, some days it isn't. Some days it's fall, some days it's winter, some days it's spring, some days I take out 88 and come back 66, and some days I've got 66 and come back 88. Sometimes Mrs. Smith gets on, sometimes she doesn't. But I'm saying, you may look at that and say, how does that work? But I tell you what, you know what? Your company needs a lot of people that show up every day for 20 years. And you need not to disrespect them and to create an environment where there's a tremendous amount of loyalty and a tremendous amount of control of procedures and processes and et cetera, where they can feel really good about working for you for 20 years. All of these there isn't one that's better than the other. Now, you may say, well, Bob, are these all like bus drivers and stuff? I say, no. Some of them are Fortune 500 company presidents. Some of them are colonels in the Air Force or Army or Marines. It doesn't have anything to do with IQ or position level. There are a lot of the people in the military that just like things real stable and under control. There are Fortune 500 companies that are basically doing what they did 50 years ago and want to stay that way. Thank you very much. They don't want someone to come in and revolutionize their profitability. So it isn't that there's a high IQ over here and low over here, or high there and low there. It has nothing to do with IQ, etc. But let me tell you two dynamics that are pretty predictable. One is that as you move from left to right on this, there is an exponential sense of boredom. There's a designer-developer talking to a designer-developer isn't bored. Very low level of boredom. But a designer-developer talking to a developer, there's quite a bit more boredom there. But talking to a developer stabilizer is sort of a boring experience, and talking to someone who is out here is really, to talk the 17th time about if it's going to rain today to the designer-developer is very, very boring. But let me show you what the other way is. Exponentially this way is stress. So if you ask my dad, who is over here, to come over and help design something, he would experience extreme stress. But if you ask me to ride with him on his bus every day for the next 40 years, I'd experience extreme boredom. Now, one of the ahas that comes out of this is that those two dynamics are true even if it's husband and wife. Because you know what? Kids that get married young tend to find opposites attract. The older you are when you get married, you try to find someone more like yourself. what I found. But with young kids, opposites attract, but find it difficult to communicate. And so what happens is, and this is not gender-based. One of the things that's really critical to understand is it's not gender-based. In other words, there are a lot of women who are designer, developer, presidential captains and would like to be the president of everything they ever touch, and a lot of men who are developer or stabilizer, strong players that don't want to lead anything anywhere. Sometimes they're married to each other. And find it difficult to communicate. Not impossible, but just difficult. Oh, let me show you one other thing. We talked about goal setters, problem solvers, and opportunity. Where opportunity fits in, opportunity can be sort of anywhere along here, but designers are typically problem-oriented. But it's theoretical problems. The problem of how the intergalactic system works, kind of problems. The designer-developer is the closest you get to a combination of goal-oriented but problem-friendly. It's like 60% goal-oriented and probably 40% problem-friendly. It's the closest to 50-50 of any of the phases. But the caution is, be careful not to assume because that's you that everybody's like you, because the developer is almost 100% goal-oriented. And the developer stabilizer is the one that says, I hate problems, but they're not theoretical problems, they're practical problems. They love solving problems and hate setting goals. And the stabilizer is problem-oriented, but it's actually problem prevention. They hate disruption so much from their routine that it's wiser to do preventative maintenance so nothing ever breaks, so that everything can stay in a stable form. Well, that's probably more than you wanted, but they gave me a pen and paper, and so... But this is in a thing called the team profile. You can order it off our website or like that. And organizations like Campus Crusade order these by like 100 at a time or something like that. So they use them a lot for sort of pre-screening and to help get people in the right place. Because if you see a person, because they look presidential, you put them in a position of being the president, but they're really a strong player, you're going to be real frustrated, and so are they. So to the extent that you can get the right person in the right place, it really helps. And then to avoid burnout, if you can see that I'm here, but my company has moved on down to here, and should, in a sense, most of it move on down to there, you understand why you just keep itching to sell the company when really it's premature to sell it. The owner and the CEO and you're burned out, how do you deal with that? The reason you're burned out is one of two things. Either you're in the wrong phase, like I say, you're a designer developer and your company's over here, because I've never seen a burnout designer developer designing and developing. You don't get burnout doing what God made you to do. You'd burn out doing stuff He didn't prepare you for, in a sense, didn't design you for. But then go back to the concept of balance. I would encourage you to schedule, and it may take you a year to do it, but schedule at least a month to 3 months away. It may take you a year to set up your executive team to be able to function without you there or something. But schedule yourself some time away just to go into deep rest, what I call deep rest. When you're in a state of burnout, it's basically deep fatigue. And that comes typically from the stress of indecision or lack of control. The stress burns your energy, and then being over here burns your energy. Being out of position burns your energy. So I'd encourage you to go away for a month to 3 months. Just rest and just sort of reflect and pray and sort of get your rest back. Get over the fatigue and the burnout. And then ask yourself, is it time to sell the company? Do we need to bring someone else in? Just sort of, but look at it with a fresh mind. Because the old saying, you can't give something you don't have and you can't teach something you don't know, is still true. If you have no energy left, it's hard to energize a team. So the quicker you can get to the point where you let some young, energetic people energize the team and let you rest for a little bit and then come back with a fresh eyes on it, the better off you'd be. And then to have, the other thing is I would say that to have someone who is experienced, either a mentor or a consultant or a board or someone, spend a little bit of time with you on that time away would be helpful too, because you can't be objective about your own company or your own self. So it may be helpful to go through a few instruments like this or something like that that would basically help you know, where do I fit? What is my role in the company? Because your role may have changed considerably. Let me give you a question that's real helpful in defining your sort of next level with a lot of CEOs. A lot of CEOs that I work with are shocked when I calculate out how much they really make an hour. Anyone who came up starting at hourly are shocked at how much they make an hour. Because you realize that most of you make, I don't know, $100 to $5,000 an hour. If you look up what you make a year with your stock options and your stock appreciation and stuff like that, you're probably at $1,000 to $5,000 an hour. And you say, last time I checked hourly, I was $4.50 an hour when I was in college. I say, I know, that's part of the problem, is that you don't see that what your time needs to be focused on is really high priority stuff. So I say, whatever, let's say whatever your company is, take 1/10 of that. Let's say if your company's $1 million, ask yourself, what would I have to do in an hour to be worth $100,000 to the company? Or even $10,000 an hour. What would I have to do? And you say, well, actually, when I'm negotiating with such and such to do such and such, let's say it takes me 5 hours, I make $500,000, that's worth $100,000 an hour to the company. I say that's the kind of stuff you should spend your time on. And so just by asking the question, what do I do that's worth that kind of money? And you may say, well, it's negotiating this, but you say, I hate negotiating this. Then maybe you're in the wrong business. But basically ask yourself the question, what is it that I do that only I can do, that I enjoy doing, that's worth 10 times more than my salary, and how do I spend more hours doing that? Is another question you want to, it's a kind of question you want to ask yourself. Because a lot of times CEOs feel like, I've got to be doing something, but I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing either. Because the company seems to be running on its own right now. What do I do? You know, when I go in the office, what do I actually do? And so those are some of the ways I look at it. And then basically, if a person says, what do I do? I say, well, then let's look at what is your dream and how far do we have yet to go? Because if you got your team fully engaged at level 1, what's level 2? And how do we begin helping you find out who should be in charge of level 1 while you move it on up to level 2? Let me draw you a picture. I usually draw this with developers, because developers, at the end of your life, developer, if you're a developer, there are 2 ways that your life will look as you look back on it. One will be, did this project for Alcoa, did that. It went pretty well. This one I worked for U.S. Steel and it went here. And this one I tried on my own, it didn't work. And this one I did try it on my own, it worked. I was there for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, and got frustrated. And basically it's sort of like, these can be millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's sort of like you're as good as your last project and you retire and that's it. You got a string of projects you've led, none of which have led to anything. How many people do you know that you could, your uncles and cousins and people that you could say that's been their life? They've been project guys going from place to place to place, but never amounted to anything. The second way to look at it is more like this. Do project 1, find the person to turn it over to, and go to project 2 in the same company. Or if you're the owner, in your company. And then when that's done, go to project 3, and it may be a little bit smaller, but it doesn't take as long to get going. Get it up and going in 6 months, turn it over to someone, get this one going. And at the end of your life, you may find this one, man, I remember back in from 83 to 85, man, we grew this whole division, blah, blah, blah. And so at the end of life, instead of this sort of string of pearls here, you've got this pyramid where in our company, I have enormous credibility because of all the things, God's let me do in that. It's like there are two different ways to look at it. But as you're looking at being burnt out, at this point, some people look at it and say, maybe it's time for me to move to another pearl. And I say, maybe it's time to find the right people to put in charge of this project and simply move on to the next project in the same system. Yes?
A similar way of looking at that, but moving to different companies, would be look at what happened after you left the project. If it got turned over to somebody and they grew it into a huge company, you have some credit for that.
Exactly.
Kind of like, you look in the Bible, and people were all, well, everybody died, but you look at how they died, many of them didn't look like successes, but they planted the seeds of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask them at the end of their life, well, I did this project, I went here and I preached, I went there and I preached, and nothing seems to have happened. But 2,000 years later, there's a huge church.
Exactly.
So those people could, even the ones in the top that went to different companies, could end up with a big result.
Most developers rarely look back, however. One of the dimensions of a developer that's sort of pretty typical is that developers are so goal-oriented that they rarely look back. Now, this company may have become McDonald's hamburgers. The McDonald brothers could look at it and say, we took it up to here, and then Ray Kroc took it clear to 7 stories up, And so we had a big part to play in that. But the stock that they sold him for $1.4 million became like $4.6 billion or something, if they'd hung on to it, kind of thing. So you can look back and say, I have a lot of pleasure in the fact that I helped start McDonald's, but I don't still own any of it. Or you can say, I stayed with the company and I turned it over to someone and that division's going well and we own it. Not everyone should stay. You don't have to feel like a failure if you don't do this, in my mind. And you may say, no, I like this a lot better. But it's just two different ways to look at it. And I'm saying if you're burned out at a phase, the temptation is to just want to go to a different company. And I'm saying maybe it's to get someone in this company, turn it over to them, and meet with them almost like a board of directors or a consultant, and then let that build, then you go on to phase 2 of the company. Yes?
I run a small company, a really tiny one, actually, compared to probably a lot of the ones around here. It seems like I have a lot of responsibilities in the development all the way through. And I probably fit in one of those places better than another. How do I get through all of that? Is it just hold on?
Winston Churchill is famous for having said, sometimes our best is not enough. We have to do what's required. And sometimes there isn't anyone else, so we just have to do it. The question is, if I have a small company and I'm sort of in charge of all this, what do I do? I say, here's the kicker. In a small company, I'd advise you 2 or 3 things. Number 1, consider getting advice from outside. It can be a brother in another city, it can be your father-in-law, it could be anyone, but consider getting some outside wisdom and counsel as sort of an advisory counsel, because it really helps to bring objectivity to a company where you're sort of drowning in the subjectivity of it. Secondly, the rule of thumb is anything someone else could do 80% as well as you could, you're wasting your time doing it. In other words, if they couldn't do it ever as good as well as you can do it, but if they could do it 80% as well, then it's time to maybe hire that away. And then to basically look, like I was saying earlier, at what are the things I do that are worth, let's say, $10,000 an hour. And let's say this is a graph of a 40-hour week. And you say, typically, I do about 2 hours about 2 hours of that week are worth about $10,000 an hour. In other words, there are certain things I do that make the whole thing go. And then I drop down there, some things I do, maybe another 5 hours, that are maybe $1,000 hours, and then it sort of drops off pretty sharply beyond that, and the rest of my week is at about $30 an hour, or something like that. The question is, how can I fill in this first? This is the zone you want to hire someone first, obviously. And then to free, if you could get 35 hours to put onto this level or this level, is your best shot at acceleration. And you may say, well, Bob, some of you will be surprised by this question, but a lot of people have asked me in rather executive level positions, if I get an assistant, what do I do with them? You know, it's like, how do I actually maximize an assistant? Because I've never had one. What do I do? I say the right assistant can double your effectiveness. You say, yeah, but what do I do with them? I say, okay, what you do is you make an exhaustive list of everything you've got to do. Then you ask yourself, what could that assistant do 80% as well as I could, and simply assign it to them. When you assign it to them, give it to them on a basis of red, yellow, and green. Meaning, here's a list of things that I'd like to ask you to do. And I'd like to go through them, and I'd like to have you tell me whether it's red, yellow, or green. Green means, I've done it many times, I know exactly how to do it. Relax, I'll do it. You won't have to worry about it. Yellow is, I think I know how to do it, but I'm not sure in your setting or whatever. If you could do it once, and then I could probably take it from there. And red is, I don't have a clue what you're even talking about. And then ask, just give it to that, and then just assign them the greens immediately, demonstrate the yellows, and then ask yourself, maybe I should get someone else or have someone else, or maybe I have to keep doing the reds, or maybe it's going to take a longer time to get them up to speed on that. But I would say, among other things, if you're doing it all, there's another philosophy, and that is you hire from the top or hire from the bottom. And some people say, well, all right, there's me, executive 1, and that's about all there is. I say, well, instead of hiring executive 2, executive 3, executive 4, executive 5, I say, okay, if you got executive 1, hire assistant 1. Don't go out and hire a $100,000 a year person. Go out and hire the right $30,000 a year person, and let them maximize you. But then instead of saying, okay, I've got an assistant, I'm going to go hire an executive, I say, no, be careful right there. Because assistant 2 may be able to double your effectiveness again. And if you know how to deal with an assistant, maybe assistant 3 is even double it again. Then you say, okay, now I'm sort of maximized, then hire executive 2. But a lot of people, particularly churches, are guilty of this. They hire, a Christian education director, an administrator, a pastoral care person, a worship and music leader, and there's no support staff. And these people are typing their own letters, or they're arranging their own meetings or whatever. So that you're paying them $60,000, $70,000 a year, and their work day to day could be hired for $30,000 a year. So you're paying them $60,000 a year, and they're giving you a $30,000 activity. But if you can hire them for $60 an hour, and they'll give you $1,000 to $10,000 hours, that's when it gets to be really profitable, helpful.